Hi, Colin. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Leanne.
Great. Well, I've got Colin Robertson, Dr. Colin Robertson, here with me today, who's a sports scientist and elite sportsman and trains many elite sports people, and also is a speaker for Feel Good. And he's going to be delivering our Wellbeing session on moving more on Thursday as part of our 6-week sprint. We're into week 3. The session today, in light of Mental Health Awareness Week, is to tap into Colin's knowledge, find out a little bit more about mental health in the world of elite sports and how mental health impacts people who are high performers, A-type personalities, and how none of us can escape from some of the issues around mental health. So yeah, I just wanted to say hello, Colin, and just to hear from you about what you've done, your qualifications, and all the great stuff. Why you're such a badass, basically.
That'll do for me. Yeah, my background, really, it's over 20 years now working in elite sport. So that's everything from athletes who are training and developing, preparing for the Olympics. Done a lot of work in international and national rugby, both codes, league and union. And I've worked with combat athletes, and a particular area of mine is working with people who are going to attempt things such as climbing Everest and K2 and rowing across the Atlantic. So people who take on quite adventurous type of task, really, North Pole treks and those kind of things. So across that, really my remit has typically been involved with the strength and conditioning, planning and preparation, the exercise physiology, so looking at how they adapt and how we can keep them well. Nutrition is always a constant theme through the work I've done. And in amongst all that, really, it's been I'm not a psychologist, but really dealing with resilience and coping with those environments, high performance environments, and how we really take a kind of psychophysiological approach to that, where we're looking at how we can prepare ourselves physically and physiologically, and the impact that has on the mind and decisions we have to make, and a lot of the coming to terms that we have to arrive at, either with success, failure, end of career, all those kind of aspects, really. So across that broad and multivariate platform, that's kind of where I spent my time for the past 2.5 decades now, really. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think probably the burning question on everyone's mind is, as we move through to 6 weeks of lockdown, and we've since found out more recently that this looks to continue for a lot longer. So we've got to get used to the new norm, which is going to be from working from home, and trying to manage to keep fit, to stay active outside a normal routine. Gyms are closed and all of that. So, we've got families at home. It becomes more challenging and harder to motivate ourselves as time ticks along.
Yeah.
So, what's your best advice for those people, all of us really, who are stuck at home, and we have the fridge in front of us, so there's all the wrong kinds of food probably waiting for us, to the chocolate and all the nice treats that we feel we deserve working from home. How do we kind of get into this new norm and get some sort of sense of normality now, and some sorts of routine where we're exercising, we're starting to accept that the holiday's over, and we really need to focus on eating well, sleeping well, exercising on a regular basis, and getting some sort of fitness routine in place?
Yeah, there's so many parts to that, isn't there? First of all, what I will say, I'll jump on the first thing you said, is don't rely on motivation. Motivation is a charlatan. It comes and goes, and if we only do things when we feel motivated, we'll typically find that we don't do a lot. So it's far better to think about discipline and then think about a plan and look at this new normality. And I think the important thing to recognize is that when this phase ends, we will go back to a new normal. So the idea now is to plan ahead. So it's to harvest what time we have now and build some new habits and behaviors and routines in, and then really try and predict or get some idea on what the new normal is going to be. So what I advise everyone to do really is to put themselves in a position to be successful. So don't set yourself up to fail. Failure is important, but we'll come to that in a moment. When it comes to, when we exercise, and it's good to be out of breath and uncomfortable, that's okay. But to begin with, we should measure things in time, and certainly not distance or repetitions. So exercising at home, a lot of people are limited as to what equipment they've had or have. And I think that's a really good thing, because it will encourage you to do things that maybe people have lost touch with, which is, wherever possible, be outside. And, whether that's immediately outside your front door, doing simple things like press-ups, freestanding squats, burpees, real old school, really tried and tested good exercises. Put the timer on. You don't need to go all out intense. Just work through those comfortably. Keep breathing, be in control, manage the situation, and go through a little circuit that can be totally body weight. Adding to that is walking. Walking is one of the keys to health. As part of my work on the health side of what I do is looking at the reversibility of type 2 diabetes through exercise and nutrition. And walking is the key. That's why that 10,000 steps a day model came in. We should all be looking to achieve that. And then once we've got that down, let's walk briskly and with a bit of purpose and intention, so we know that our heart rate's up and we're breathing a bit deeper. And then, do you know what people have lost touch with? The most efficient human movement any biomechanist on the planet will tell you is when humans run. That is when we are our most efficient. And we've fallen out of love with it. And I think we've fallen out of love with running because we make it too hard. And we've set our expectations around Mo Farah and Usain Bolt, when really running should be fun. And you should run until you need to stop, and then feel free to stop, and then run some more. I always say to people, it only works on a certain generation. But if you remember the program Friends, and I say to people, there's an episode where Rachel and Phoebe go for a run around Central Park. And I encourage everyone to run like Phoebe and not to try and run like Rachel. Enjoy the moment, be mindful, be present, and just have a laugh. And then really build up from there. The more time you spend doing that, and I think if people can get to somewhere around about 20 to 30 minutes, the measurable difference on their health and wellness is off the scale. In fact, when it comes to things like predictors of chronic health or chronic disease, you put yourself in an entirely new category and much, much lower risk. And remember, that 30 minutes is 2% of your day. So let's really start to put a value to that 30 minutes. And in our current schedule, which might be more flexible, is to start to weave it in. And if we don't do it every day, let's try and do it every other day and build that up. And let's get on new terms with that kind of physical activity. And it might be that you go for a cycle for 30 minutes. But again, I do believe you can achieve the same outcome just by looking at a handful of exercises that you do in a circuit kind of format. If the weather's not great, do it indoors. If the weather's shining and there's a bit of space, do it outdoors. The main point is, whether it's that little circuit, whether it's walking, jogging, cycling, the main point is in this time, learn and attach a new value to that and recognize what it does for you physically and mentally. Exercise is the strongest antidepressant on the planet. If we could prescribe it in a pill, we'd give it to everybody. So it's really important that we take this time to really build a new relationship with it, attach a new value to it, so that when we go back to our new normal, we wouldn't dream of giving it up. We're in love with it. We've been successful at it. It's positive, and we want more from it. So that would be it's a bit evangelical, but that would be my main encouragement. Attach a value. That's the key bit.
Yeah, I think 30 minutes a day, like you say, is only 2% of our entire day. So there's really no excuses why we can't find half an hour in our day. But we talk about the importance of moving more. As human beings, we're designed to move. How often should we be moving, Colin? I mean, we talk about doing 30 minutes a day, but the reality is we really need to get up on a regular basis and move around, because I know in my house we're kind of rotating from room to room, and at the moment I'm slumped on the sofa, which is not particularly great for my posture. But come the end of this conversation, I need to move around. And, what should I be doing every hour and a half? I mean, what would you recommend? Should I be doing a sprint round the block? Should I be doing a few press ups or a little dance, or, what do you recommend?
Any of those. No. This is really where the current situation is 100% an opportunity, because we're far more in control of how we manage our own time at the moment. If you're working at home, it's different to working in an office. So I would really encourage people to think the longest you would want to spend at the computer or at the television, whatever your work position is, 50 minutes maximum. And then if all you do is get up and move, that's a change of posture, which brings about a change of blood pressure. You might walk into another room. Maybe, if you live in a house where you've got 2 floors, take a little trip upstairs to use the toilet, or just go upstairs and back down. That different loading, as tiny as it seems, but done regularly, makes a phenomenal difference. It really does. And it could be that you've done that 45, 50 minutes and you just go to the tap, draw yourself off a cup of water, spend a bit of time standing. So everything from that low level bit of a movement is starting to make a really positive impact on your overall physicality and wellness. Now, what I also like are what we call exercise snacks, which is might be
I love that. Yeah, exercise snacks.
An exercise snack, and that's more like what you're alluding to. So that's where you go.
Rather than going to the fridge and helping myself to the chocolate.
Yeah.
A different kind of snack.
Yeah, and it's that notion. When we have a snack, it comes from the notion that a meal is a meal, and this is just a part. It's the same attitude. So whereas that 30 minutes might be our exercise session for the day, we're going to have a snack version of that. And that could be, as you just rightly said, you might just run up and down the yard a couple of times. Have a little bit of a stretching. Everyone should stretch every single day. So it could be where you stand up, change position, go through 3 or 4 stretches. They don't have to be, outlandish, but where we stretch and we release muscle tension, really bring up and pull ourselves into a better posture. But I love the idea of that, where you just nip outside or even on your stairs, do a couple of laps. A little bit of a stimulus for heart rate, get that up a little bit, so it's not just pooling and sitting sedentary. Gives the muscles a flush. And if every 2 hours you did that, so every 50 minutes you're going to break, but every 2 hours you'll put an exercise snack in, the difference that would make, one, on your metabolism, more importantly on factors like rest and heart rate and blood pressure, your sense of wellness. We know that we think more creatively. Our brain activity is stimulated through those little upregulations. And if you were to count that out across the course of a day, say you had 3 or 4 tiny little exercise snacks, they would constitute something that was similar to the feedback and output from an exercise session. And these little tiny things done every day are far more valuable to us than boom and bust, which is where most of the time we're quite inactive and in poor posture and resting and sitting, and then maybe once or twice a week we go to the gym or do something. That's what we call the boom and bust model. You go boom once in a while, and when you do that, you typically go bust. What we encourage people to do, and more the evidence has gone this way, are those exercise snacks, changing posture, moving, just stretching, freeing off, has a huge impact. It really does. So then, with our 30 minutes, let's say, we add that to it, suddenly we've gone from quite easily 2% to 4% of our day. And then we think, okay, so that's a bit of the activity broken up. And as you quite rightly said, we're a migratory species. As we are now, modern human, we're about 300,000 years old, and we were designed to cross plains and survive in the wild. And now we all sit down all day. So it's important that we do what we were designed to do. The body heals best on the move. But in amongst that now, if we start to think, right then, so that's the movement part done. How am I putting myself in a good position with regards to sleep? Because that's the other part. So, we can discuss maybe nutrition a little bit later, but between movement, the active part and the stimulus, and then the sleep part where the body remolds, that's where everything's fixed, taken care of, adapted, made stronger and better. So when we can look at how we are when we're active, but are we addressing how we are when we need to sleep and creating meaningful sleep opportunities and undisturbed sleep patterns of behavior? That's really important too.
Well, what I've read, there's a large percentage of people who are genuinely struggling with anxiety through this COVID lockdown period, and it's having an impact on our sleep.
Yeah.
So, Colin, what are you seeing with regard to people's sleep being impacted in terms of the anxiety people are feeling at the moment? Is it quite marked?
It is, yeah, it really is. So I work in around, some of my research is in around sleep behavior and the impact of a lack of sleep. And some of that work goes with a couple of sleep clinics that operate throughout the Northwest, which are mostly research focused. So we have people feeding back to us all the time. And a really interesting phenomena took place within probably the first 2 weeks of this lockdown phase. And that was that more and more people were reporting disturbed night sleep, waking up in the night. But also, quite interestingly, they were waking up without knowing this in a uniform fashion. Most people were reporting to us that they were waking up around about 0300 hours, so 3 o'clock in the morning, and finding it really difficult to get back to sleep. Now, this is quite interesting because we have a period of sleep that we call the golden hours, which are from 10 o'clock at night to 2 o'clock in the morning. And this has everything to do with hormonal changes and the onset of melatonin and a certain amount of restoration that the body goes into. And a prime time that you're likely to be disturbed and awoken is around about 0300 hours anyway. And just after that phase, probably about an hour and a half later, our core temperature starts to increase. And that means we're getting ready to wake up for the next day anyway. So this 3 o'clock in the morning thing was really interesting. And then second to that, we started to see more and more people reporting disturbed night sleep, waking up. And most of what they were reporting centered on anxiety, stress and anxiety. They were unsure about what was happening, what the future outcome of this was, concerns about family members, about their own health, susceptibility to becoming infected with COVID-19. So these all sit on the mind and they gnaw away. And then the first opportunity the body gets, which is to become slightly awakened, they flood in and then sleep is gone. So how to manage that practically? You're probably not going to fix it in one night by doing what I'm about to say. But hopefully, and what we've seen with the groups we're working with, is we are seeing over 80% of those people are now back and sleeping a full night. The thing to do is to create your sleep environment. So when you know you're going to go to bed, switch off technology, wind down, get yourself ready. Don't be eating any foods later on. As you alluded to before, there's more of an opportunity to snack at the minute and maybe snack on the wrong things. So it's a good idea to know what are the good guys and the bad guys for late night eating. But more importantly, stop eating a good 2 hours before you plan to go to bed. Avoid any kind of caffeine a good 6 to 7 hours before you intend to go to bed. And most importantly, all of our work hours have been stretched. So it was bad previously, people working all around the clock. But currently, the 9 to 5 is gone. It's people get up in the morning, they're checking emails, and they're ever more so checking them late at night. You've got to stop. There has to come a point in the evening where you go, that's the email's done. You have to switch off from all these things. They've got to be left till tomorrow, so that when you go to bed, when you go to the place that you're going to retire for the night, you can put yourself in what we call a sleep-like rested state. And what we mean by that is turn the lights off, no distractions, no heat. So put your phone away or turn it off. Lie down in the dark and relax. Close your eyes. And rather than letting your thoughts find something to attach to, be more mindful. And we have a body exercise that we work through where you just start to go, right, well, how does my left foot feel? And how does my left ankle feel? And how does my left calf feel? And you work your way up and then do the right leg. Think about your breathing and be present within the silence and within the darkness. And more often than not, it takes less than 2 cycles. Most people don't even get to the end of the first cycle and they find sleep. And by going through that, there's 2 aspects to that. There's a physical aspect of relaxing and shutting down. In fact, there's three aspects. There's a sensory aspect, is we're switching off all light. So not even the blue light of the phone is getting to our eyes. And the third part of that is that we're slowing down the gears of the brain, and we're focusing on something that has no significance to the outcome. We're just wondering how our toe feels or our knee. And by going through this and thinking of our breathing, we typically find sleep better. And by going through that unpacking process, what we've found so far, with above 80% of the people that are getting through the night most nights, they've gone way past this phase of being interrupted at the 0300 hour, and they're finding sleep a bit more of a fixed routine again, because it can be really hard. So hopefully in amongst that, there is something that people can start to consider before, hopefully long before they start to think of things like medication to help you sleep. I try and discourage people away from medication for sleep wherever possible, and it should only be used in extreme circumstances, because sleeping tablets, they don't actually send you to sleep. You're just not awake, and there's a difference in those two states. So it's really important that we mentally, physically unpack and put ourselves in a position to have successful sleep.
Yeah. So we know that sleep is, if we're struggling to sleep, it can be a precursor to mental health issues. So it's really important, if we are struggling with our sleep, to get some sort of support around that. Is that right, Colin?
Absolutely, yeah. And what we say, the general advice we give to people is to seek advice if you're having 2 or more nights disturbed sleep for more than 2 or 3 weeks. So if this is starting to form a pattern, it's time to seek advice on what to do about it. And for some people, sometimes just having a chat can help. And for some people, although I'm not a huge advocate of it, maybe once or twice on a difficult night, there are medications that can help. But I think, from years and years worth of research into sleep now, the best thing we can do is recognize the situation, acknowledge it. The minute we acknowledge something, we can start to do something about it. And we can say, right, this is not right. My sleep is becoming disrupted. It's not a healthy routine. And more often than not, actually starting to talk about it is the key, and starting to, again, unpack those anxieties. And then that's a whole different corridor of conversation as to where that might lead us. But the minute you acknowledge it, it's a warning sign. Something I could labor this for hours. We are a diurnal species, where we are designed. Our evolution is to be awake during the day and asleep during the night. It's essential. If that's being disrupted, it's really important we do something about it.
Just tell us briefly about the golden hours, because it's one of my favorite tips. And when we first did our workshop around sleep, we did a whole piece around the golden hours. And I find it absolutely fascinating, because as soon as it hits 10 to 10, especially on a Monday, Tuesday and a Wednesday night, for me, it's my signal to get upstairs and get ready for bed, because I just want to get the golden hours in. And I feel like I'm almost getting ahead, for the week, just to kind of, build up my resources in terms of sleep. But also, I suppose, to get over the weekend, where we tend to get, not so much now, but the weekend we're out playing and having fun. So really need to make up for our sleep. But the golden hours, I think, are a great tip.
Absolutely, and that's music. Just to someone like me, that's music to my ears to hear that you do that, because that's where we want people to be. I think all too often, the advice that we give out, people think, I need to do that, it's really strict, and well, what happens if I go out on a Saturday night? And what we say to people is, if you can get those golden hours 2 to 3, 4 times a week, that is incredible. That's amazing. And the health benefits, the psychological health benefits and the physical health benefits are amazing. So all this ties into it. I'm going to say a simple principle, but it's not at all, but I'm going to try and simplify the principle for you. You have we all have what we call the fundamental rhythm, our biological rhythm. And this relates to our core temperature. And that's pretty much on a cycle that is just a little bit greater than 24 hours a day. So obviously our day is divided into 24 hours with regards to our rotation around the sun and on the Earth's central axis. But our fundamental rhythm is just a little bit longer than that. And we catch it up over time. But what happens is from around about 4:30 in the morning, 0500, our core temperature starts to rise. And that triggers off a whole heap of hormonal and physiological processes. A lot of this is governed by a little gizmo at the back of the brain, close to the hypothalamus. And it's one of the only genuine feed-forward mechanisms in our body. So we know to a certain extent through evolution, our body has been pre-programmed to respond in a certain way around this cycle of how we live. So as the day passes on and our core temperature reaches a peak around about 6-7 o'clock in the evening, and then it starts to come back down again. As it starts to come back down, we start to open the door for melatonin to come in. And melatonin is the key. I'm not going to mention all the hormones, but I want you to remember melatonin. This is the key sleep hormone. So this is now the body preparing itself to shut down and go into a sleep state. And this is really key because, like most hormones, whenever they arrive and they're present, they're bringing something else along with them. So we are very much tied into time. So this 10 o'clock now, this 2200 hours, if we can be asleep at this time, this is a prime time for nocturnal activity of the body. And what the body starts to do is amazing. So it starts in its first sleep cycle, it starts to repair damaged muscle tissue, neurological tissue. It goes to town on the stomach with regards with digestion, with repairing the gut biome. It's incredible. And what you got to bear in mind is the reason why this 10 o'clock, 2200 hours to 0200 is so important, and not just a arbitrary 4 hours anywhere you can put it, is because of your body's pre-programmed response to certain types of hormones. So we have to really take advantage of that. And a sleep cycle going from non-REM to REM, so non-rapid eye movement to rapid eye movement, all in total one cycle is about 90 minutes. And we encourage people to be trying to achieve as many back-to-back undisrupted cycles as possible. So if you're asleep or in a sleep-like rested state from 10 o'clock till 2, you've had you've had 2 cycles and you're an hour into the 3rd cycle, and your body is literally building you brand new. Every cell in your body is getting work done to it by a team of special elitist hormones, proteins. The body is remodeling and getting. So if your exercise is enhanced by the fact that you're asleep, then because the body can remold you better. If you've been studying and you've learned something that day, the mind will consolidate it better to memory if you're asleep at that time. It's incredible. If you've been immune suppressed and you're asleep at that time, your body will go in and start to work towards boosting and restoring that immune system. So it's one of the greatest research-proven, evidence-based windows of opportunity for the human species, and people have lost touch with it. People sadly have lost touch with it, and because of 24-hour TV and 24-hour life and convenience, more and more people now miss the start of it. And what happens is when we miss the start of it, if we miss that 10 o'clock, then we're likely to stay up past 11 and closer to 12. So we'll get some of that time, but we're not harvesting all that time. So what we encourage people to do, because the research tells us that if you can be asleep at that time 2 to 3 times a week, 4 is the ultimate, then you get all the benefits as though you did that 7 days a week. So I think that's a really good return on investment. If you can be in that state 3 or 4 times a week, you're getting the benefit as if you did it all the time. So that's a glossary of the golden hour, but I can't emphasize it enough. It's so powerful. Everything you do, whether it's education, physical prep, mental prep, is all enhanced by being asleep at that time.
Right. So I'm starting to see a sort of a regular pattern here in terms of marginal gains. Mm-hmm. All these little aspects that I can start to build into my daily routine. So the breaks, the morning exercise, but potentially breaking up my day.
Yeah.
Doing some press ups at lunchtime or in my breaks, and then after work managing to do something as well. Getting my sleep in, my sort of golden hours in 3 times a week. And obviously there's nutrition as well. And I'm not sure whether you meditate or not, whether that's something you like to do, but again, they're considerations, aren't they, that contribute to our mental health.
Absolutely. Meditation is a word that can it can lure some people in, and it can actually be a barrier to other people. So I'm a huge fan of meditation, but I often discuss it in terms with some of the athletes or individuals that I work with different type of language. And sometimes that language is just simply about being present, about being mindful. And one that I found works a lot with our type A personalities, and I have to say predominantly male type A's, is where we just discuss this notion of taking time to practice of being aware of ourselves and watching ourselves through a purely non-judgmental filter, and just going, hey, it's brilliant if you can coincide it with stretching, or some people like to use yoga, but taking a moment, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes of every single day to observe ourselves from within and look without any bias, without anyone else's feedback, and go, I do that, and recognize it, and recognize that there are no bad thoughts. How we control our thoughts is more important as to whether or not we classify them as good or bad. Recognizing something's not the right thing to do doesn't mean the thought itself was bad. It's the process of recognizing that you have that thought and not giving yourself a hard time for it. So I think meditation is vital. It's a vital practice for people. I just think that often we have to attract people towards the practice of it with a different language, because some, in my experience, some very A-type personality people think that that's too soft, and they don't want to do that, and it's all about being in complete control, and not recognizing any cracks or weaknesses in the veneer, and that's simply not the case. In fact, the strongest people I've ever worked with, people who've really impressed me and blown me away, who've coped with all manner of things, have typically been the ones who are the most self-aware and self-acknowledging, and take that time to work through those processes. So that's huge. How that ties into food, I don't think we've got time to discuss it. My personal take on this starts with a very, very old saying, which is that you 100% genuinely are what you eat, and you are 100% genuinely what you eat forms how you think. So when we eat a diet that is largely based on processed and enhanced, fortified, and for want of a better word, fake food, that has a trigger. Ultimately, we are a collection of cells and hormones and chemicals, and we respond like any test tube to what chemicals we put into that system, and they affect not only us physically, but they affect us psychologically. And I think people, by wreaking havoc with cortisol levels and serotonin levels, and they wreak havoc with their thought patterns. And more often than not, when we're working with an individual who is dealing with a tough scenario, either our first or second step is to analyze how they're eating, what they're eating, and how we can look to get some wins and improvements and gains on it. What you eat can live. I don't know if you're familiar with this phrase, but we have a phrase within endurance sports, particularly people who are doing things like Ironman events and ultrathons and that such, which are catastrophizing thoughts. And these thoughts, they come directly in the wake of our glycogen, our carbohydrate stores depleting. So when they start to run really low, people start to think of a small task as a big task, and a small obstacle as something that's insurmountable. And the way we overcome that is through training, dietary modification, and on-the-day prep, so that never happens. So It never happens when they're participating, and it doesn't happen in life. There's a fair bit of work goes into that, but it is a huge part of the principle of keeping them mentally positive, coping, alert, and in control. It's a huge part of it.
Okay, there was just one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because I think people will find this really fascinating. That mental health is all about, Mental Health Awareness Week is all about reducing the stigma and raising the conversation, having a positive conversation around mental health. But it's always more difficult for men, I think. And we see it with our workshops. We tend to get a slightly more female skew, especially to the resilience workshops. And men are less inclined to want to talk about their mental health. And I think what is really fascinating is that it can be, in many people's eyes, viewed as a weak men have mental health problems, but actually it's the reverse, isn't it? It's the high performers that you train, the people that you see that have very, very high expectations, they're perfectionists, they're A-type personalities. These are the people that put a lot of pressure on themselves to perform all the time, that are more inclined potentially to have some sort of mental health problems. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Yeah. What have you seen?
Absolutely, 100% agree. And we see this, don't we, all across, not just within sport. And I've been really lucky. I've worked a lot with some of the elite forces as well. So the guys who are, SAS and that kind of level, not just UK elite forces, but some from across the world as well. And they mirror the psychological traits that we see from our A-class high achievers in sport. And they also mirror the kind of personality types that we see that are CEOs of companies, that are successful musicians. So we see the exact same. So it's that pursuit of perfection, very tough on themselves and their expectations. But a key part of it, which I don't think gets discussed enough, is something that we refer to as arrival syndrome. So a lot of these people are driven to achieve, and whether that's a gold medal or whether that's X amount of millions of pounds worth of business, or whether that's a military task on operation, they're driven. And then when they get there, the arrival syndrome kicks in, and it's kind of, well, what next? What's going to feed? Because actually it's the craving, it's the journey that drives the person, and not that. And that's why, we hear a lot of people who will say, they'll hear of someone who's famous musician who's committed suicide, and they'll say, wow, you had millions of pounds and everyone loved you and you'd done all this, and they still killed themselves. And that, to me, couldn't describe the circumstances and the problem any clearer. It's not that. If those were the things that made us mentally healthy and stable, then there would be barely any suicides. It's not that. They're not the things that preserve our mind. So what we have to come to terms with, and what we work with the athletes, and I've been really lucky in my time, I've partnered up with some phenomenal psychologists, and I've learned a lot from them. But really through experience of being in the field, and even the things I've undertaken myself, it's acknowledgement again, recognizing this is how I feel, and that's what it is. And that's the point that you need to open up and have a conversation. And it can be difficult for some people because they feel they have no one to talk to, or they'll feel that by talking about it, they're showing a chink in their armor, and that people are going to perceive them as weak. And that couldn't be any further from the truth. And the sooner we start to have the conversations, the less likely a person is going to be to feel that way as they progress down the road. So the good thing is to start before there's a problem. A bit like your fitness and a bit like your waistline. Start before there's a problem. Don't fix anything. So the minute, we start to reach out and we're going to embrace and do something new, or we're going to strive for something new, start to capture the landscape and start to have the conversations. If you don't have someone in your private life, which a lot of people do, but some don't, that you can confide in and talk with, then one of the best investments you can make is to pay professionally and see someone of that type. But I think that ever more so now in the 21st century, without a bill attached, there are groups that we can tap into. There are social groups and mechanisms that we can reach out, and we can be in touch with like-minded people, and we can get that support. Everything from going for a walk up a hill with a buddy. So, you're out to change the location, you're out in the outdoors, and just being able to chat. And the person you're with doesn't need to have answers. And if you're listening to someone who is offloading some of their concerns, there is no obligation on you to fix that person's problem. All you need to be is that sound box and take it in. And maybe at best, open up a little bit yourself and go, yeah, you know, I felt that way too. Because sometimes we get so lost in ourselves because we mistakenly think we're the only ones who feel that way. And all it takes sometimes is for someone to go, yeah, I get that as well. I feel that too. So it's important, not just from the reaching out and dealing with our own things that we've got bottled up inside, but it's important when you're the person who's reached out to, is to be able to open up to that kind. It's not even a responsibility. I think it's a real, what's the word? It's a real privilege that someone around you in your family or in your social circle sees you as the kind of person who can listen to them. And we all need to do that more. You know, from the year 2000 to now, so 20 years the past, you know, the male stereotype has changed, and this notion of machismo ideas and what it is to be a man has changed. The rules have changed, the landscape has changed, and for some there's a certain amount of trauma that has come with that change. And it's about realigning their self-identity and expectations with the new blueprint for how society perceives a successful competitive male. But I think the exact same true for females too. There's almost a notion now that, you know, if you're not a female who wants to be the CEO and wants to drive the fast car and lift weights as big as the guys and run as fast, that almost you're not modern enough. And that's just simply not true. I think what we need to recognize is that what we get presented with and reality have a distance between them, and that we have a permission within ourselves to subscribe to as much of it as is good for us, and to switch off from the stuff that we don't need and that is only causing us harm. So it's a balancing act, but I've never seen a problem in the world, everything from military types to sporting types, that can't be solved with conversation, by, you know, repeatedly reconnecting and talking. And it's typically only when people really start to isolate themselves and then feel isolated that it becomes a really dire situation.
Yeah, and it's even more pronounced now, isn't it, that we're in isolation and that we're going to continue working from home, and we won't back into a typical office situation. So it's even more important than ever, with this increased anxiety that people are feeling, that we make a real effort to reach out to each other.
Definitely.
And recognize that people might be struggling. So, you know, I had a chat with Paula Leach from FDN this morning, and one of the biggest initiatives that they're putting in place is these ambassadors and wellbeing champions, and just getting as many people on board as they possibly can to make sure that you've got different types of people that can relate to, you know, so if there are different types of people within that community of wellbeing champions, there'll be somebody that looks like somebody else. So what's important is that there's somebody that understands me if I'm having a bad day, somebody that may be reaching out to me, that can, I suppose, tap into how I'm feeling, and potentially, you know, get me to think about doing what I can do for somebody else as well. You know, how can I help somebody else? I think it's very, very much contagious, you know, making an effort to reach out to each other and look after each other during this time. But I really love what you were saying about mindfulness, or being mindful. I think it's very easy to ignore our own needs, isn't it? Especially when we're busy. And I think we can use this time of self-reflection in a way to really start to tap into what's important to us, what our values are, and what's important to us, and to really recognize what it is that we need. And I hope that I certainly am using this as an opportunity to reassess, to think about what's important to me, to start to put some positive habits in place, and to really just listen to what my body needs right now.
Yeah.
So, you know, as we come out of this, we can all come out stronger if we have a little bit more self-awareness of what it is that really makes us happy and complete.
Absolutely, and 100%. And remember, as the film title says, happiness is a pursuit. So it's not a destination. And most of our life is consumed with the journey, not the arrival. So we need to enjoy the journey, because that's the part we live. And going back to that arrival syndrome, I've seen everything from people get gold medals to earn $1 million, to you name the prize. I've seen people reach and achieve it. And the day of achievement is fleeting. And it was all about the journey. It's what we become, who we are by living that journey. And more importantly, what we come for having lived that journey, and what journey we go into next. And right now, we're all coping with a similar type of journey, but in 7 billion different ways. And I think you did right. We need to look at this moment right now, this press pause, and we need to say, right then, so who am I? And also, how much of me is the version I give the world? Because that's how I interact and I cope and I'm productive. And how much of me is genuinely me? What do I really need that maybe I don't need to tell everyone, but as long as I'm aware of it, I can then go about satisfying it. And that comes back to our pursuit of happiness, doesn't it? Because we all play a part. People through my professional engagements have an idea of who I am and what I do because of the part I play for them. And I'm totally at peace with that. And I think that's a good thing. But when the Zoom shuts down, when I come home, then there's the part of me that is the other part that I need to then, pick up a guitar and strum away for 30 minutes and just, and just relax and read something and do those things that are just about fulfilling this space and how it powers my journey. And that's, that's where everyone needs to be. And I think a problem we've done with where the fitness industry has let people down is that it's sold them products they don't need, and it's sold them an idea of what fitness is that is unrealistic and unattainable for most people. So what I'd like to come from this is that people realize fitness is about moving well and moving often, and that you don't need a product for that. And the products we should all buy are fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, learn a vocabulary of how to cook for ourselves again, and spend more time and have mindful time around eating. So not the TV, not a distraction, maybe in conversation with our family. I'm really hoping that that's a big part of what people take from the current phase that we're all going through.
Yeah, I think it's about getting back to basics, isn't it? And just appreciating the simple things in life. And like you say, it's just sitting around the table and cooking and eating together, and not really having to rush off anywhere, which enables us more time to reflect and to be mindful of what's going on, because there isn't an awful lot going on, actually. Or there is, but we've got a lot less going on. So therefore we are much more in touch with ourselves. So I think I love this enjoying the journey. I think it's absolutely key. And I think too many of us are always focused on the goal and we don't enjoy the journey, and how we make people feel while we're on that journey is really important as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The worst outcome, and sadly some people have to live with this, is what they become in order to achieve what they thought they wanted, and also what's sacrificed on that way. I think it's more important to stay true, enjoy it, build relationships and connections. That's what life is 100% about. And let that goal be a little bit more fluid. Let it have more inherent compromise as to what it might actually be. And I think ultimately there's far more contentment and happiness realized from that approach than the hard nailed grind, and achieve on those terms. I really, really do. From the athletes that I've worked with, the ones who are most content, who've transitioned into their second phase of life post-sport, the ones who are most content, happy, fulfilled, weren't necessarily the ones who got the most medals or the ones who got the best medals. They're the ones who experience that world, and it is a privilege to experience that world. And then we're able to take all those things, that sense of self, the connections, the values that were learned by being in part of sport, and then make that flourish somewhere else around families and other types of opportunities. I really do. If there's one thing I've learned, I guess, from all of it, is that the main prize, it's fleeting. It really is fleeting. It really is. There's so much more to be had.
Yeah, I love it. Focus on the journey.
I know it sounds a little bit preachy when I start to go on about those things.
In fact, it's the reverse. I think all of us can identify with being so focused on what it is that we want, but actually life is precious, as we know right now, and to focus on every day and on the small achievements every day that bring us one step closer to the ultimate goal, and the people that help us get there and share in the success along the way. And that's what this is all about, looking after each other. Yeah, so what we were saying is that enjoying the journey at this time, I think we all need to reflect on what's important, and making sure that we enjoy the journey, that we take time to check in with others, appreciate the small wins every day.
Yeah.
You know, those little micro achievements that take us one step closer to what it is that we are looking to do ultimately. But to also recognize that we can't do it on our own.
Absolutely.
Our colleagues and the people around us, and getting people bought into the sort of the greater goal, and doing it together, I think is really important.
Definitely. And also by doing that, you know, we foster growth and a growth mindset, and we become energy givers. So by actively recruiting people to our circles and relying on them and making it known that we can be relied upon, we develop a growth mindset, and people start to buy in, and they start to see how important it is to have that level of reliability. And then the key outcome of that is feeling less isolated and feeling more and more that, one, we're valued, but also that there is a net there. There is a net, there is a tribe, there is a community there of people who are invested in who we are and what we do, and our journey matters to them.
And I've seen a little sense of camaraderie, and everyone coming together during this time. And I think it's really going to impact the way in which we work moving forward. And it'll never be the same again. And I just think it's everyone has dug deep and pulled together, and we all need to look after each other.
Definitely. And the one thing I say to anyone is, whether it's training for an event, whether it's selection for the elite forces, however tough it is, it's temporary. And remember that. And every step forward, every day forward, we're working towards that light at the end of the tunnel where we can all walk out. Just keep safe, keep sane, keep together, and we will get through this. It's temporary. This isn't the forever. That's the key bit.
And look after each other.
100%. I think, you know, what's been really encouraging to see from this, and this happens a lot, doesn't it, in tough times, is there's been a broadening sense of national community.
Yes.
And a lot of the political rhetoric has gone. People don't even want to hear it. They just look for the latest update, shut off, and then they're more interested in sharing things on social media for fun, clapping at 8 o'clock on a Thursday. You know, I think we've seen so much more of a national community come out of this. And if we can keep 10% of it, we'll be better off. Let's hope we can keep 80% of it.
Yeah. And I'm definitely seeing a move toward compassionate leadership as well. And I think that can only be a positive thing for organizations. Let's hope we can keep that moving forward as well.
100%.
Take that with us.
definitely.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Colin, for your time. It's been really fabulous talking to you.
Really enjoyed it.
We're looking forward to sharing this with the HR community.
Brilliant. Thanks, Leanne. Thanks. Really enjoyed that.
We'll see you on Thursday for
Yeah.
the Move More.
Brilliant.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
week. Thank you.
Bye.